Brother Jay Sweatt, who is not only a retired warden, he is also a faithful member of the Newburgh Church of Christ here in the city. And he'll bring up his panelists, his roundtable panelists in his own way. Let's give Brother Jay a good hand.
Thank you. As Brother Jerry says, my name is James Sweatt. I'm a member of the Newburgh Church of Christ, and I have 41 years in corrections. Been a warden, director of population management, so I know a little bit about prisons. But I'm so happy to be here today and tonight, and I have three of my co-workers, friends, ask y'all to come up here. Warden Chandler, he is a warden now too at one of the newer prisons. And Amy Robey, who also, as the brother said, she's the warden at Luther Luckett, where Midwest, where the program is going on. And Greg, I feel like I raised Greg. and when he will explain that when he gives his talk. So what we're going to do is, one of the things that we want to do is, we want everybody to listen, what we're going to try to do is, they will help us understand what we need to do to be successful as we go into the prisons. You know, if you don't get anything else, I want you to get this. The Bible stands for itself, but we have to look at the total man, not just his spiritual being. You have to look at his personal life. You know, is he a drug addict? Does he have alcohol problems? Does he have a sex addiction? And you know, does he have a temper? You know, we have to look at all of that. And I have to throw out some kudos to Brother Griffin, the New Life program. I've used it. If you use it, it meets the total man, not just like I said, the Bible stands for itself. But we also have to reach in and get those other problems and help them work on those other problems that they have. If we don't, there's no way they're going to succeed when they come back out. And that's why we lose so many of them. You know, Brother Jerry was telling me that we baptized almost 200, and we don't know where half of them are. Okay, so we can't just baptize them. We have to give them something else. So, you know, so we don't get anything from this round table. Let's get that. That we have to do more than preach Jesus, even though Jesus can stand for himself. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with Warden Chandler, and he will give us his perspective of what we need to do to be successful in the prison, and also Warden Robey, and then Mr. Powell, my friend, will give us what we need to do to help an inmate be successful after he gets out. You know, we can't forget, yes, we baptized him. He's in a controlled environment. He's going to get out. Where we going to be? You know, he needs a job. You know, he still needs that mentoring, just like we try to give him inside the prison. He needs it when he comes out. So they'll go about 15, 20 minutes and tell us what they think we need to do, how we can better. You know, they tell us what we can do to help them be better, and then that's going to help us be better to get our mission over. So I'll turn it over to Warden Chandler.
Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Sweatt. I want to give you some numbers first. This come off of Corrections webpage when I left the house. 18,387 people in prison or jails in Kentucky today. 8,400 in the jails. The race breakup is 75% white, 22% black. Average age in prison today is 39 years old. 39 years old. One of the things that I've seen over my career is the aging of the population, and that brings on some unique problems and some unique challenges that you can help us with. 89% of our population is male, 11% is female. And here's a little tidbit. Females going to prison is the largest growing population in the United States, not only Kentucky. Looking at the classification of that the Department of Correction uses, 50% of our people have committed a violent crime, either violent or what we call other violence or sex, 50%. 13% are in on a sole drug charge. I can tell you, Ms. Robey can tell you, Mr. Sweatt can tell you, that probably drugs had a part to play in all those crimes, all those crimes. Listen to this. The average sentence in Kentucky is 14 years. Close your eyes a minute and think back 14 years ago. And if you were in this room for 14 years and I opened the door and let you out, what kind of world would you go to? What would you not know? That's where you are extremely important. We can no longer just house people. We can no longer, as wardens, we can no longer just be responsible until they walk out the door. We have to take some responsibility for when they leave. You can help us. You can help us. There's the 11,718 people on parole. Probation, the difference between parole and probation, parole is you've got a chance out of prison. Probation, you've probably done a misdemeanor, a year or less in jail. 26,000 on probation. Almost 10,000 on some kind of pretrial diversion. What I'm trying to get to you is look at the numbers that we're trying to manage. Ms. Robey was telling me her turnover is about 85%. All of you who manage or own a business, can you imagine operating a business with that kind of turnover? With that kind of turnover. We're trying to do that in this system. 2019 annual report from corrections, and we're always a year behind, so this is 2 years old. The average cost per inmate per day, $75.91. You can stay at Holiday Inn for that. That sums up to $27,708 a year. $27,000 a year. A correctional officer starts at $30,000 a year. $27,000 a year. I started locking people up in 1978. There were about 3 prisons, about 3,000 people. You know, the population, and COVID has changed everything, folks, as you know, and you can imagine what it's done to a prison population. The population's grown almost 800% in Kentucky alone. You know, Kentucky at one time was the fastest growing prison population in the nation. And the United States is the largest incarcerator in the world. Nobody does it more than we do. So what can you do to help? And let me put on my warden's hat for a minute. A lot of you have the heart for this. All of you have the heart for this, or you wouldn't be here. You have to have the mind for this as well. You have to understand what we need, and I know some of our rules and regulations are, sometimes we do silly things, don't we? But you have to understand the rules and regulations are there for consistency for everybody. I think probably one of the best programs that I've seen is a program called Bridges that Mr. Sweatt had at the Roeder Farm Center. People come in and made contact with the inmates, and when we let them out, they mentored them when we come out. As Mr. Sweatt said, they need Jesus, but they need to eat. They need transportation. They need a place to live. They need reliable employment. They need reliable employment. You can help us with that. All of you can help us with that. What do we look for? We look for commitment. We look for commitment and consistency. We look for people who are really committed to helping us, that understand the rules. And your first time in prison, we'll do a little orientation and tell you what we expect and what the rules are. But you have to be, let me say this, you have to have the correctional antenna. Some people will take advantage of your good nature and your charity. I'm sorry, I apologize for that, but that's going to happen. Let us help you avoid that. We cannot do the programs we do in the institution without aftercare. Once they leave, we have to have something outside the prison. That's all I have. 15 minutes?
Well, I knew you was long-winded, so I just gave you a little extra time. Next on the panel will be Warden Robey.
Good evening, everyone. So, Mr. Chandler raised me and Mr. Sweatt raised me. They're my mentors, myself. So we all have mentors. So these guys are my mentors. And so as they retire out, people that they raise, like me, become wardens. And so I learned a lot from these guys. And, they have very similar methods, and I learned a lot from them. So, as a warden, I've always been one that was real big into reentry, try to prepare these offenders when they leave. And that's my main focus, is prepare these guys for when they get out and be successful in the community. But that's a hard job, and we can't do it by ourselves. We really can't. Public safety is very important. We have to keep them safe, keep the public safe. Got to keep them in the prison. But there's a time when they have to get out, and so that's when our jobs are hard, because we can prepare them. We give them programming. We give them services at the institution, and people like yourselves come and do volunteer work at the prison. And that's a huge incentive for us as wardens, to have people like you all, the citizens, and people they can relate with, to come into the prison and help them. It goes really far, and I've seen a lot of offenders over the years. They can take 20 programs that we offer them that are really great programs, but it takes that one interaction at a revival or cookout. It's really interesting to see how, I know some of you all may come in and do the cookouts of the prisons, and food is a way to get them to listen. I mean, you have a grill out there, they're coming. I mean, I've seen, I'm at the Roeder, we had some big cookouts, and we had probably 800-900 guys on that yard, and they were listening. They may have came for the burger, but they took something away. I promise you, they took something away. And a lot of those offenders had came up to me, and it did change them. 4 or 5 came up and let me know how much of an impact that cookout had on them. Not the food, it was the message that was being delivered. And so that kind of opened up that window to get them into the church. So whenever they start going to the church at the institution, the chapel, that helps us, because now they're invested in something other than criminality that could be going on around them. And so when they go see you all, they see people. They see us as employees. We may be ones they can talk to, but they see you all as their neighbor. When they get out, they see you all as community leaders. So that is huge for them, and they can create a bond with you all that we can't provide them, unfortunately. But so that's why it's just so important for when y'all do come in. to show them how to be a good community member. And I know we have a couple of husband and wife teams that would come into the institutions, and that's really important to them because not a lot of them haven't seen a positive like family relationship, like a husband-wife team. And that really shows them how they interact, they learn from that. And I've seen that be very successful. And we actually started at Luther Luckett, we started a new Healthy Lifestyles program. And that program is for offenders that are 18 to 26-year-olds. And it's crazy to think we've had a need for this forever. And we just started this program, and we're teaming up with Spalding University. And this program is dealing with therapeutic. We have students coming in doing clinical work with these offenders. And it's a 2-year program. And so, in those offenders, one thing we're missing right now, and something that I would like to, when COVID lets up, is community leaders to come in and work with these guys. Because we have the doctors coming in to help them and do therapy with them, but we don't have the church coming in and helping these guys. So I really would like to see an investment from the community into these young adults that are leaving. They're all getting out. All these guys are 6 to 7 years away from getting out. So we're trying to catch them before when they first come in that door, before they go into that prison lifestyle, and because you'll see some guys, they'll come in with a 5-year sentence, and they'll make that 5-year sentence a 15-year sentence by catching additional charges while they're inside. So we're trying to get them when they first come that door and get them into that positive culture, and religion is part of that. So if we can get them to you all in the church, and you all can show them a different avenue, and you all can talk to them about church, and they can come to you and talk to you about their problems, and you all can help them with them as well. And so the department also created a new program. It's called a mentor program. And so they've seen a need. They've seen that. I can remember when I first started at the reformatory, we let the inmates walk out the front door, and they would walk themselves down the road. We didn't really have the best reentry then. But we've came a long way. I can tell you we came a long way. We have so many reentry staff in the community now. They have options where they can go get assistance. But a lot of times they don't go for correctional staff for assistance. They go to people they know. And so that would be people like you. If you make that connection in the prison, when you get out, we want them to be able to go to you or go to someone. If they have to call us, that's fine, but they'll probably prefer to come to someone like you. So the new mentor program in the institution, and you can get more information about that on our website. But what it is a program where you sign up and you go through a training to talk to you about interacting with offenders. It's an additional training than what you already receive for volunteers. But this program allows you to come to visitation. You actually get to come to visitation and visit with them and sit down and actually have a one-on-one conversation with them. And you can bring in paperwork and talk about helping them prepare to relieve. That's kind of the goal, is you can help the guy get a job. You can help him get housing if you want. You can't give them no money now, and they can't have any exchange like that. But you can say, hey, Goodwill, I've talked to Goodwill for you, and they're going to give you some clothes when you get out. And I talked to this person, they're going to give you a job. So you can help prepare them for release. It's a really great program, and unfortunately, they had just started it, and I think we were in about 6-7 months of it before COVID hit, and we had put everything on pause. So I encourage you to look at that on the webpage. I'll tell you, we really were trying to get it going. We thought we'd have a huge response, and we didn't have that huge of a response because it is a lot of time and effort, and you already come in and volunteer time for religious programming. And so that's just another ask of you all, is to come and donate your time and come up to visitation and visit with them. You can even send them emails on their JPay machine. We even allow that. So them are 2 new things that the department had always said, no volunteers, you can't come to visitation, and you can't talk to them on the computer. You can't talk to them when you leave here. So those are 2 new things the department has changed so that you can actually create that bond with them and help them. But there are rules, of course, no money exchange or anything like that. But I think that program is just a way of the future. That was like our first step of saying, hey, we can't just expect them to go to church on Sunday with them and never talk to them again. So this is kind of like the new thinking, and I think it's going to work. But we just got to get volunteers in to help us get them activated. So, all right, well, that's all I have.
Thank you, Amy. One thing, before Greg starts talking, I had a couple of conversations with Brother Stevenson, and one of the things I have to echo Amy with, they have no consistency in their life. If you're not going to be consistent, don't even start. Because if you're not going to be consistent, I had to tell the guys that was working with the program that I had, if you say you're going to be here every Tuesday at 7:30, if you ain't dead, you need to be here. Because once they lose the respect for you, you will never get it back. Never. And one way that I have a special relationship with all the inmates when I was a warden is, if I told them I was going to do something, whether it was good for them or bad, I did it. Consistency. And I was talking with Amy, and she was saying they were trying to get the program back up and trying to get some mentors. Couldn't get any. It had about four.
We have 10 at Luckett.
10. And they got over 1,000 inmates at Luckett. And how many people you have in your program? So, and it's really important. The program that Warden Chandler was talking about that I had at the facility that I had when I was warden, called Bridge, each inmate had a mentor. So they had that one-on-one connection with that one mentor. And then one of the things that was new to correction was I convinced the commissioner to allow me to bring in family once a month for family counseling. That's a very important piece, because if I have an alcohol problem and I'm going home to a wife that's got an alcohol problem, that ain't gonna work. So, we had to get the families to understand whatever problem that resident had, if he's coming to your house, you got it too. And you have to learn to deal with it. So, but the key to the whole situation was that mentor. And when Brother Jerry was talking about we baptizing all these people and we losing them by as fast as we baptize them, it's because we don't have that connection with them. It's almost, and I know it may sound like it's impossible, and this is not just for the men, it's for the women too. They need that one person that they can trust, that they know is going to be there. Because just like Amy said, most of them really haven't had a mother-father relationship, a family unit type situation. So, you become, and some of you are probably going to look at me strange, but one of my best friends was an inmate. I spoke at his funeral. Me and him became really close in prison. And his name was Stuckey. And Stuckey had a stroke, and his family knew how close we were. And back in the day, that would have never happened. It would have never happened where I would have been able to go speak at an inmate's funeral. Oh, I've been suspended. But I spoke at his funeral, and I know his family. His nephew works at a halfway house in Jefferson County, and it was that bond that me and him had even after he got out. I would call and check on him, he would call and check on me. So once he got up on his feet, he'd check on me at least twice a month, what's going on? And I would go by the house where he stayed and check on him. So it's very important that when we get able to go back in to the prison, I'm not sure when that's going to be with the pandemic, we have to have more consistency in our programs, and men that are dedicated to do what we preaching. You gotta it's easy to talk the talk, but you got to walk it. You got to walk the
Only
talk just like you
13
talk it.
people
So,
on. How could I not
just
do
a
my
little tidbit that I was throwing there before we let Mr. Powell come in, and I think all of y'all would be interested in the relationship that Mr. Powell and Mr. Chandler and myself have with him. I'm so proud of Greg. I feel like I raised him. I've known him, you know, we spent a lot of time together over the years, and I'm so proud of him to see him here, dressed, and doing well in the community. But it took a minute, you know, and you have to be patient with him. So, Greg, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sweatt. My name is Gregory Powell. I was born and raised in the West End of Louisville all my life. I still live in the West End right now. I spent 26 years of my life incarcerated. And in my time of incarceration, I first came into the penal system in 1980. I was 19 years old. I stayed in there for 8 years. I did. And then I came back and I did 18 more years. I came back in 1990 and did 18 more years. So I spent a total of 26 years of my life incarcerated. And as we speaking about reentry, I realized that reentry starts the minute you walk in the doors in prison. That's when reentry starts, the minute that you walk through those prison doors. And as Mr. Sweatt was telling you, he raised me in prison because I was 19. And can you imagine a 19-year-old kid coming in prison? I was arrogant. Couldn't nobody tell me nothing. I thought I knew everything. I was very angry, disrespectful, no nonsense. You know, I was just that type of person because of my background and where I came from and my environment. But over the years, as you know, I told you that I spent 8 years of my life in prison. But when I came back, it goes to show you that I didn't learn nothing the first time. Because I went out there and being in prison, you hear stuff from the real convicts and the older guys, so you go out there and try something different. And I got caught up again and I got put back in the penal system. But this time I just had a different mindset. And as I was in the penal system, I knew as I went in the system that I knew that I didn't want to come back out being the same person that I was that I came in. So I began to read my Bible and ask God for forgiveness. And then I just started to educate myself. And I know that Mr. Chandler don't like to take a lot of credit for this. But I did do the work, and he always say that to me, Greg, you did the work. But I owe everything to this man right here. He was the father that I never had. I didn't even know what a mentor was. He became my mentor. He became my role model. I looked up to him. He the one that made, I ain't gonna say made me, but he the one that told me, Greg, get your education while you're in prison. Go to college. Go to vocational. Do everything that you can while you are in this prison system to better yourself. So when you get out, you won't return back here. And I did everything that this man asked me to do. And he started a college program in prison. And I tell people this all the time. He was so high on education and he was so high on recidivism, not returning back to prison. So he started the college stuff in prison. And just like me, when I came into the prison system, I had an 8th grade education. And I remember when I first got my GED, I was so happy just to get my GED. And I remember this older brother said to me, he said, why are you so happy? Because you got a GED. It don't stop right there. He said, you get your butt over and you sign up for college. And I said, college? I said, man, I'm not smart enough to go to no college. He said, who told you that? He said, did I just say that to you? He said, did the wardens tell you that? Did your mama tell you that? Did your daddy tell you that? He said, you just told yourself that. He said, and if you keep believing that you're not smart enough to go to college, you ain't gonna never go to college. So I went over and I signed up for college. And I remember when I got into college, and I remember the first time that I took algebra, and I ain't gonna lie to you, it looked like Chinese to me. I had never ever in my life took algebra. I'm like, man, I can't do this. I ain't never took algebra. And there was a guy that told me, he said, if you're willing to learn how to do it, I'll help you. And it's the first time I had ever took algebra. And when I took that algebra and when I got my grade, I scored an A- in algebra. And that right there told me, when I got that A- in algebra, that told me something about myself. It told me that if you really use your mind, you can do whatever you want to do. And that's the same thing that I tell these young kids that I work with out here every single day. If you use your mind and you apply yourself, you can do and be whatever you want to be. Don't never let nobody tell you that you can't be whatever you want to be. Because see, my own mother, who showed me tough love, told me sitting at her kitchen table when I was 14 years old, son, you're not going to live to see 16 years old. Somebody is going to blow your brains out. Because the life that you are living, it's only two places for someone like you. That's the penitentiary or the graveyard. And she wasn't wrong, because I spent 26 years of my life incarcerated. So when I tell these young men, when somebody tell you something, you listen to them. Because they see something in you that you don't see in yourself, just like people seen things in me, like Mr. Chandler. He seen something in me that I didn't even see in myself. See, he knew that I had the ability to go to college and be successful. When I didn't even believe in myself, here was a man that believed in me. And he took a risk and a chance with me. I remember the first time that they took me out of prison at Green River Correctional Complex, and I don't know if Mr. Chandler remembered this or not. And they were saying, why are you letting Greg Powell, of all people, go out of this prison and go into the school and talk? You know he's going to try to escape. You know he's going to try to run. He's going to try to do, you know, everybody was against me going out. But Mr. Chandler said, no, Greg is the guy that I want to go out. And I remember it was 6:30 in the morning, and we was loading up, getting ready to go out, and Mr. Chandler came there. He said, you know, everybody's saying, why am I letting you go out? Why, you know, you the one that's going out? And he said, I'm going to tell you something, Greg Powell. And he looked in my, I ain't going to say what he said, but he said, if you F me, I'm going to F you. And I knew that he meant business. So I went out there and gave my best, because there is no way that I was going to mess that chance and that opportunity up, and I wasn't going to let him down, because this is the first man that ever gave me a chance and believed in me. And that's why I get so emotional when I talk about it, because he was the father that I never had, and he was a mentor to me. And he don't know right now to this day, I got the job that I got because of the help that he gave me. And even though I done the work, I still give a tribute to him for that, for helping me, because he did. He helped me. And the programs that we did in prison, the outreach program, going into schools, talking to kids, mentoring the kids, that's what I do right now today. My job, I work for the mayor of Louisville. I work for Self and Healthy Neighborhoods, which is Pivot to Peace / Peace Education. And that's what we do. We work with gunshot wound victims, stab wound victims, and women of domestic violence. And I work with a mentoring program where I mentor the young men, and I share my life experiences with them. And I let them know I don't sugarcoat nothing. I let them know I spent 26 years of my life in prison, and I let them know everything I went through and what I've been through and what my thing is with them. And I tell them, if I can do it, if you just heard my story and listen to everything I've done and been through it, if somebody like me who's been to prison and lived that life, if I can get out and change my life, you haven't even been to prison, young man. And you mean to tell me if I can't change my life around, you can't change your life around and go to college? You don't have to go to prison to get a GED or a vocational trade or go to college. You can do it right now while you get this chance and opportunity. You can do it right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I told you you would enjoy that story. Again, Greg, really proud of you. You know, Chandler's been a daddy to everybody. He's my daddy too. And he worked for me. But even now, we have, me and Chandler have a good relationship. And one thing I really want you all to take away from Greg's testimony, and that is you personally never know how you can affect somebody's life if you don't take the time and the effort to get into it. Something you may say to them could make all the difference in their life when they get out. And the other thing we have to do is, you know, if we're gonna baptize all these guys in prison, when they get out, when they come rolling up in here, we can't be looking at them all crazy. You know, and that's what we do. You know, we say we believe in a second chance, but then you turn around and you don't want them to sit beside you, and you're looking all silly, and you know, and if I'm a mentor and I bring him in, and well, who is that? You know, they see all of that, and they sense you don't want them here. So you know, we really have to take a self-examination, and you have to really look at yourself and see if you really want to be in the jail prison ministry, because it takes a certain type of person to be in that in the ministry of jails and prisons. Everybody can't do it. I'll be the first one to tell you, everybody can't do it. But because it's a lot of work, a lot of patience, a lot of same thing all the time, and you really, when you say you had to turn it over to the Lord, you have to turn it over to the Lord, and you just do what you're supposed to do. And as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, let the Lord handle it. So we're going to open it up now for any questions you all may have. And if they have any follow-up things they want to say on the panel, they can. We have any questions? Well, I have a question for you. What are some of the barriers for reentry, Greg?
I just feel like when for reentry, when you, like you were saying earlier, the help, the resources that you need getting out, you know, housing, transportation, you know, a job, you know, these are the things that you need. And you know, we all need help, just like me. I had that when I got out. You know, I had people that was there to help me along the way, you know, and just like I said, reentry really starts when you're in prison. And once you get in there, you know, you begin to, you know, ways that you can change yourself and better yourself while you're in prison. And then once you get out, those are the things that you need to survive. And just like if you got family members in prison or someone you know, they're going to need you once they get back out here. And I remember Mr. Chandler used to say this all the time. You know, the people who's out on the outside saying they don't want those guys to live in their neighborhoods and they don't want these guys that, he said, but one day they going to return. So what are we going to do? Are we going to keep saying we don't want them in our neighborhoods, or are we going to accept them with open arms?
You know, I used to ask my staff this question. What do you think your job is? And they would all say, keep these guys locked up behind the fence. I said, well, that's one thing. I said, but your real job is to prepare them to get out, because you never know who your neighbor going to be. You know, we don't have, how many people we got on death row right now? 37 people on death row, and we got 22,000 something locked up. They coming home sometime.
98% of them.
And you never know who's gonna move in beside you. You never know. So, trying to get the same way I used to try to get my staff to understand that they need to prepare them to be their neighbor. As we go through our programs here, yes, we want the number one thing, we want to save them and give them Jesus. We want them to commit their life to Christ. But we also have to prepare them to be somebody's neighbor. So we have to keep in mind everything we do in the program. We have to have more of a, it's just one thing, like somebody called me, they want to volunteer, and I know Warden Chandler and Warden Amy says the same thing. They want to come in and have a Bible class. Now, well, what else you gonna do? Well, we just gonna have class out of the Bible. Okay, so, but when if you come in and say, I want to use New Life Ministries program, and it lines out, drug problem, alcohol problem, anger management, marriage, and all those guys and women have all of those issues that they're going to have to deal with when they get out of prison. So it does more than teach them about the Lord. It also teaches them about everyday life. And that's where I'm hoping, and I told Brother Stephen, that's the only reason I'm involved in this, because I really saw my program work at Rhoda. And I know the problems I had trying to get mentors, trying to get people involved. And that's what I'm saying. You got to do more than sugarcoat it. You got to put some effort and some time into it. So, I hope and pray that everyone here are ready to take on the challenge. And the people that are listening virtually too, we need to stop just talking about it, and we have to show some action. Does anybody in the audience have any questions? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Online, just a reminder, if they're watching online, they can put their questions in the chat. But there is a question coming from Sister Becky. She's asking, in regards to worship service and things of that nature, is there a way to help families that have children feel more comfortable and less fearful regarding their children's safety?
Safety where? In the institution or?
She said she's referring to within worship service in a Bible school setting.
Okay, well, I think that's something each congregation has to assure that parent. Now at Newburgh we have a junior church hours for the kids. I think a lot of churches go to that now to get them kind of acclimated to sitting still and studying the Bible, but then they have a little playtime too. So in most churches, well, I won't say most, but I know at Newburgh, we have security, and I'm one of them. I know some people frown on I am packing. We've already learned that evil don't care nothing about what's going on inside the church, because we've had people assaulted and killed inside the church. So we have a strong security at Newburgh. I don't really know about the other churches out of town or in, but we have most of the churches. We have cameras in all the hallways, and I think they would be safe in most of all of our churches now, if that answers the question. I have a question here.
Yeah, you were talking about preparing the inmates for reentry, but how do you prepare? How can leaders prepare the congregation to minister to those that are reentering, as well as those that are incarcerated, and we're trying to minister. How do we prepare the congregation for what they need when they get out?
You want to answer that?
I'm hard of hearing, so let me make sure. Let me repeat the question. You want to know how to prepare your congregation
To minister
to approach this? I think one thing, study the problem. You have to know it's. Let me tell you a story. I heard a guy one time talking about rehabilitation. And he said, you can rehabilitate a Buick because you got a parts list and you know what it looked like. But it's very difficult to rehabilitate a person because you have no idea what they've been through. So we talk about habilitation. So I think you have to understand the depth of the problem. And some of these guys, just like Greg, you know, and he gives me way too much credit. Some of these guys have had a tough life. Greg hasn't had a tough life as some of the people that we deal with and some of the families. So understand the problem thoroughly. You know, there's literature written, a ton of literature out there. Understand what some of the problems are, some of the challenges are when you're coming in. You know, we talk about anger management, we talk about substance abuse, we talk about sex offenders, we talk about a number of things, but I think for congregations, understand what you're getting into, the reality of what you're getting into, and understand the difficulties. I think a lot of times, like Sweatt and Warden Robey has seen, you know, you have the heart for it, you come in, and then you run into the problems. You run into the problems. And let me tell you, we lose a lot of people like that. Please understand what you're getting into.
Let me add to that. The same way that what I would suggest, the same way you would train your mentors and the people that are going into the prison, you almost have to train the congregation to realize and accept, you know, these guys are more of a human side, you know. And I know I used to speak to, I ain't trying to put my business in the street, but I used to speak to a drug and alcohol. I had a substance abuse program at my facility, and I used to tell those guys all the time, as you have to realize, if we are honest with ourselves, we've all had some moments. Just sit back and think. You know, we've had our moments, but through the grace of God, we were able to overcome those moments. So, you know, I used to tell the guys all the time, if I hadn't stopped doing what I was doing, and if I didn't have the parents that I had that was strong in the faith, I probably could have been in prison instead of working in prison. You have to, you really have to do a self-examination for yourself, because, you know, it's easy to think you Mr. Goody Two-Shoes and you never done anything. So you're gonna look down on this guy that had a mistake, made a mistake, and he got caught. But we all can look back and say, if I had got caught doing that, I had, you know, been in the wrong place at the right time, you know. So we have to educate the congregation, and they would have to go through a class to get them to understand. They have to not look at this person as a criminal, but look at him as a newborn Christian trying to work through the struggle. So that's the way you prepare the congregation to deal with that person. You gotta take off at, he's an inmate, he's an ex-con. You know, no, he's been baptized. He wants the same grace and mercy you got. So are you gonna give it to him, or are you gonna hold it over his head? That's it. I said something about
Yeah, is that some kind of program
It is-
that
it-
helps? And what I'm
Yes,
talking about?
New Life program is a program that Buck it works with, and he's going to do a presentation this week, and like I said, I would recommend it. How I got into it, my cousin Jimmy Burris, he worked at Jackson State Prison in Michigan, and he got me involved with it, and I got the curriculum, and we started using it at Newburgh in anger management, just kind of tied it in to it all ties in. Once he goes over it with you, I would suggest you really go to his training program that he has. I think it'll help you understand it. It just outlines everything. It has everything in it that you need. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Well, let's get him, and then we'll bring the mic over to you. Okay.
Yes, I can imagine being in penitentiary for a long time, then getting out and walking right out of penitentiary, walk right back to the streets. So I just want to ask the panel what they think about the halfway houses and three-quarter houses to kind of introduce you back into the community, help you with jobs and, apartments and stuff like that.
Well, let me go first, and then I'll tell you. I'm not against halfway houses, and I would not be against a church-run halfway house, but it takes money and time and resources. We want to do everything cheap. You got to have somebody full-time staff. You can't just hit and miss. Now, Dismas Charities, they have full-time staff, but I think they need a halfway house that's going. Now, Prodigal Ministries, they also have a halfway house in Oldham County, and they had one on, I think it was on Hill Street. And in their house, they would help you with job applications, take you to your interviews, help you get dressed, give you those things that you need to have, I don't want to say impress, but let them, whoever you're interviewing with, let them know you are trying to make a change in your life. So they can be good, but you have to be careful. Almost if you're going to do it halfway, it's almost like don't do it at all. Because what happens is they halfway do it, and then the guys don't paying attention to it, and then they get right back out there. So it's an art to do it. You have to be serious about running a halfway house. Probably Dearson Center probably has the best going in Jefferson County right now. Probably, yeah. Anybody have some panel to say?
Well, I just want to say, when I first got out, I had to go in a halfway house, and when I was in the halfway house, I mean, it helped me to, seek out employment. They really, even though we had to pay room and board, but that's a part of it because they showing you responsibility. Oh, excuse me. I said it was a good thing because they showing guys responsibility, that, to learn and teach you that nobody's going to give you nothing, and nothing in life is free. We know that. So when you're in there, you learn these things. You learn to pay your room and board. You got to have a job, because in order to stay there, you have to pay your room and board. So you do need employment, but they help you along the way. You know, you put money in the bank. You have a bank account, so when you get out, you have money saved up to buy your apartment and all that. So some halfway houses do help, and like Mr. Sweatt said, you know, you can't be halfway. You got to be full time. You know, so yeah, it helped me a lot.
And I would say the best thing about halfway houses is that we don't want to send the inmate back to the same environment he came from. And so a lot of times their family is where we don't want to send them. And that's sad to say that, but a lot of times we learn that their families is where their mother is a drug addict or their father's a drug addict, and that's their home placement. That's their only option sometimes, is saying, a lot of times they'll come to you and say, if I go back home with my mom, I'm going to end up back in here. So those halfway houses are amazing. They're transitional housing. And we put them there, and that gives them actually a chance to get a job and get on their feet, and maybe they can go to an apartment instead of having to rely on mom or the father that is not a good figure for them, or their neighborhood. Sometimes it's getting them out of that neighborhood that brought them there. So halfway houses have been really beneficial for the prison system, and a lot of times it's the only option they have. Sometimes it's the only option they have, and sometimes it's the best option for them.
I spent 4 years on the pro board, and so I got to see a lot of guys go to halfway houses, and there's some excellent halfway houses, and there's some poor halfway houses. So I'm like Mr. Sweatt. You can't go halfway with a halfway house. You got to go all the way, all the way.
We happen to have somebody here who is running a very successful one that and let me say say a little bit about what Amy said. You know, in the program, the Bridge program that I was talking about, and I told you that we would bring in family members and we would do family counseling. Believe it or not, we brought in a family, and this young man was going to go with, it was a girlfriend. He was going to move in with his girlfriend. And when we told her that couldn't be any alcohol or couldn't be any of that, she said, well, he can't come to my house. You know, so again, you have to, it's something that you have to look at. Like Amy said, sometimes the halfway house is the best place for them to go. And so we winded up changing his parole plan and got him into prodigal ministry, and he did very well there, and they helped him get a job, you know. And at Prodigal Ministries, they have Bible study every night. They still keep that religious vibe going in the halfway house. So they eat together, they pay their little bit, but like Amy and Larry said, halfway house a lot of time is the best alternative. So does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah. Need a mic up here.
I have it.
Okay.
I wanted to answer this young man's question right here because I don't think he hit what he was asking completely. The only way you're going to get your church involved or your congregation is you've got to educate them by having classes, by talking with them, mentoring with your elders and your deacons, because there's where your problem lies. So if you can talk to your elders and your deacons, and if you can bring people in to talk to your congregation and make them understand sometimes you have to, my mama used to say, go with F5s, you use honey instead of vinegar. Sometimes you have to rub your congregation the right way to get what you need because people don't understand. And they are fearful. I've seen people say, she's an inmate, move your purse. No, she didn't come for that. Your mind is wrong. So it's your job, if that's what you're doing at your congregation, bring people in and educate them. And if you educate them properly, they will work with you to help you with that inmate or those inmates that are coming in. But education is key. And I want to piggyback on what they were saying, and I know Thomas is not going to say anything today, but I think Tennessee Prison Outreach Ministries in Nashville has one of the best it is, as far as halfway houses or transitional housing. Thank you.
I had a question also, because this is a two-part. Paul from Jackson Street Church of Christ. Mr. Gregory, as you know, and we all should know, one of the most challenging things a person can do is to change, right? And so my question is, what was it with you that made you able to go back to your pod, go back to your unit, knowing that you got a mentor? I'm sure everyone else knew. They see you trying to get your GED. They see you trying to study, and you probably got materials. How were you able to overcome all the ridicule and criticisms you were getting from your inmates, probably from some of the officers and others, and because I know what's up with that kind of thing. What was it that made you able to overcome all those distractions, homeboys, gang, all of that, and keep pushing through?
Well, what really made me change, and what it really was, is I got 7 brothers, and me being the second oldest. All of us was in prison at one time. And I knew then, when I seen my younger brother come into prison, I knew it was time for me to change and make a difference in my life. Because I knew that if I didn't, then I was gonna see my kids in prison and my grandkids in prison. So I had to break that cycle. So I knew, because I knew that all my brothers, and Mr. Chandler is a witness to this, my little brothers thought that I was king. They looked up to me. Everything I did, they looked up to me. And when I began to change my life, they began to change. Because my little brother was working with me in the outreach program in prison. And so I knew then that I had to change. And that was the thing that made me change when I was in prison with 3 of my 6. We was all in the same prison at the same time. Me and my other 3 brothers. That's when I knew it was time for me to change.
The motivation of being a role model for someone else and seeing your future legacy being in the same situation was a big motivator for you.
Yeah, most definitely.
I was going to comment on what you said about when an inmate or someone gets out of prison. And in our particular situation in Birmingham, Alabama, we had a sex offender come, and we got the letter, and then our elders met, and they agreed, they would go to the congregation. And what they did, like you said, educated the congregation, but they also said to them, parents, you have small children, you better know and do your job and know where they are. Because it's up to the congregation, like you said, to accept them, but it's also up to them to be responsible.
Yeah, when you're talking about sex offender, it's an altogether different monster.
Right.
It's a totally different situation, and I have to agree with what your congregation did, but it all boils back down to education, So I've been in that predicament at our church, and I think what you have to do, you just have to be aware. Parents have to be aware of their surroundings. Right.
Well, I also had people ask me, like you had said, I think you said, Mr. Crispy, aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid? I go in the women's work release. I sit with them. Right in the middle, the first time I was there, I was the only white lady there with all prisoners with whites. And I sat in the middle of them. I wasn't afraid. I said, they're women just like you are. And you might be in there with them, and I'll teach you a Bible class next.
Well, you know, I used to tell people used to ask me, you know, and I'm kind of like Greg. I just got to go home at night, but I grew up in prison. I started working in the prison since when I was 22 years old, and I did 41 years. So my life is prison. But people used to ask me all the time, "Are you scared?" I said, "I feel safer in prison than I do walking the street. At least I know who's trying to get me in prison. I don't know who's trying to get me out here on the street." So, you know, you have to kind of put things in perspective. You know, so why you going to be nervous? Them guys are trying to get out. They're not going to do anything to you. Now, it's an exception to every rule, but basically, their main objective is to behave and get out. And they know if they do something to a volunteer or that, they're not going to get out. They done. Plus, they're going to get beat. So it's interesting. It's altogether a different monster.
Let me add a little bit to that. I think going back into educating your congregations, you've got to shed some stereotypes. Study the problem. Study who's in prison. You know, think about who's in prison and why they're there. Not all sex offenders, you know, the law in Kentucky lumps a lot of people in a group. They're not all bad, folks. They're not all bad. So educate yourself, shed some stereotypes, open your mind, and let's talk about respect. Let's talk about creating an environment where the Greg Powells can learn and overcome the situation. That's what you need to help us do. Help us create that environment.
So one of the
She's bringing it.
Thank you. One of the things that our ministry here in Kentucky has been faced with, and Warden Robey, we're glad to have you there at Luther Luckett, and we look forward to coming over and sitting down and talking about how to strengthen the ministry as well as working with you. One of the things that I know that the system has to be concerned with, but we really can't have the effect on helping inmates without helping them work with their families. And that's been something that has been frowned on in the years past. I'm praying that we can begin to have some training sessions during this period of transition of from the pandemic to the reopening, where we come in, and perhaps we can have some training from your perspective, and we can bring some people in to help all of us understand how do we work with this and bring safety and all of those issues with the inmate and their family and the volunteers from the church. So I'm hoping that is going to be something that all of our prison systems will be looking forward to doing, because there are others in there like Mr. Powell, but there's not enough of the warden to be able to handle everybody. Just thankful to God that he was able to help you. But we know there's a lot more of a need for a lot of others. So I would hope, I'd like to hear what your thoughts about working with the families, and what are the liabilities, what are some of the good things that could come from it.
And I think you're right on it. And working with the families is very important, because I learned a lot from the Bridge program and HR ministries. They bring in the families a lot. But I learned a lot from that, is listening to those family members talk sometimes out loud, and they're just telling their truth. And you're like, wow, we've got to work on you all before they come home. Because if they come home to you, you're an enabler. You know, you're going to help them get back in that lifestyle. So you're right on it. And I think the mentorship program, and I hate to keep bringing it up, but it's a new program, and you as a mentor, if you can be a volunteer for the church, for the religious program, but you can also be a mentor. And as a mentor, we treat you differently. You got additional training, and so you get to talk to their families and come back and talk to them. There's no rule against that on that program. So that's why that's one things Kentucky's doing to help with bridging that gap. And so, and like Mr. Sweatt said earlier, if your ministry wants to do a program where you bring in the family, you got to present a program and say, hey, we want to bring, not just you just want to bring the family in, but this is what I want to do when I bring the family in. This is what we're going to talk about. We're going to have a class on this, that we're going to do this and do this. And I'll tell you, Prodigal Ministries, I was nervous the first time. I was a deputy warden at Rotor, and they were like, we're bringing the families in. Wait a minute. So I went to them. I went to every one of them, and I was amazed. I was completely amazed on how organized it was, how structured it was, and those offenders got so much from it. So I know only 2 programs I know that do that right now in Kentucky is Prodigal Ministries and HR Ministries. But they have a great program. They lay it out. It's very organized and streamlined. So if your ministry is interested in doing something like that, that would be something you would talk to your case with me about, and we will work that out. And you bring up a good point with that is one of the important parts of, I think what a lot of ministries don't do is get to know the administration. So I've really encouraged that. Get to know the administration. Get to know us. We're not bad people. We want the same thing you want. We need you, and you need us. We need each other. So get to know us. Let's talk about this. We can tell you what our problems are, and you can say, well, this is what my people can bring to the table, and we can do great things together. So I encourage you to talk to the administration. Most administrations will work with you, and y'all can come up with a plan to bring the families in. I'm sure there'll be no issues.
No, and let me echo what Amy is saying. The key is, one of the questions I had, a strategy to have a partnership. You just can't, like she said, you got to have it outlined. This is what we're going to do. This is how long this class lasts. You got to put it on paper. You just can't walk in and say, well, we want to have a mentoring program.
Plan your work your plan.
Yeah. What are you going to, so what is your mentoring program going to do? It needs to be put down in writing, so when the commissioner calls her and says, what is going on? She can say, wait a minute. This is a mentoring program that they're doing, and here it is right here in writing. This is each step of it. So it's a combination of keeping her out of trouble and keeping you out of trouble. So she'll be able to hold you to what you got on the paper. And so when she said, well, you said you were going to do this, you can't get mad at her if you're not doing it. And, she said, you're not doing it, well, you can't come in. Well, then, she gets a bad rap because she said, well, they done threw me out. Okay, you're not going to say, well, they threw me out because I wasn't doing what I said.
And that's not to say that if things need to change, but if they need to change, talk about it and make sure the change is for the better. Plan your work your plan.
Yes, sir.
In the state of Kentucky, when in the state of Kentucky, when an offender is going to be released, is there any check that he's given upon release? And if so, how much is that check for? And whenever he is released, has the institution already assisted in his preparing a reasonable resume? Does he have a photo ID? Does he have his Social Security card if he's lost it or whatever? What is done from the state side before he gets out?
Now, speaking of money, they take the money they have on their books home. Okay, so we don't give them any type of stipend or anything like that. We don't have a program for that. But if we do have someone that is indigent, we have a fund that we can give them some money, but usually we encourage saving their money, so when they do get out, they do have the money. But as far as IDs, we just now started a new partnership with the Department of Transportation. We actually just did mine 2 days ago. But the new program is the Department of Transportation is coming to the prisons, and we're making photo IDs. They're making photo IDs for the offender before they get out. So they'll come in and take their picture and put all their information in, and then they'll mail the ID to us, and then we'll give it to them upon release. And we do the same thing with Social Security cards and birth certificates. You can apply for those at our reentry departments, and we'll get those in the mail. And so when they do leave, we have all those items for them to take with them.
And like Greg said, reentry starts the minute you walk into the prison. You know, in our orientation programs, we tell inmates, get prepared to leave. You know, you make a salary in here, we pay you, put some money aside, save some money, prepare yourself to leave. Help us prepare you.
Yes, sir. I need some clarification. Does the state allows, in other words, does the state allow to give information concerning the inmate that's leaving, especially the ones who have been baptized and gone back into community? How can we contact that person? Does the state allow us to have that information where we can do a follow-up? Okay, I'll answer this one. Cool. Well, you can answer it too. It's two of them. You can look on, is it Cool? Cool. On Cool's online, it tells he's been released. But if you are doing your mentorship like you're supposed to, you're going to know where he's going. Okay.
Cool.
You will know where he's going before he gets out if you really true and you are his mentor. So we need, right? You know, but if you go on Cruise online, you can get some information on that.
And for everybody, COOLS is an acronym for Kentucky Offender Online Lookup. So you can get it, and it's for the public. It'll tell you where an inmate's at and some vital information about it. But I agree with Mr. Sweatt. If you're a mentor, know, educate, know, understand. Consistency, folks, is so important, so important. And your dedication is so important, to everybody inside, to the administration as well,
I just want to add to what you said, and the young man sitting right here on the front row too. When you get out of prison, is one thing I know, like I say, reentry into once you get in. When I got out of prison, I didn't have a Social Security card, I didn't have an ID, I didn't have a license, I didn't have a birth certificate. I had none of that stuff. I saved my money up while I was in prison. When I got out of prison, I had about, well, I ain't gonna go into how much I had because my mom died and she left me, but I did save my money up. So I got out of prison with a nice lump sum of money to help me to get the things that I needed, like a vehicle and all this and that. And I had prepared myself. So I went downtown to the transportation place, got my ID. I sent out for my Social Security, went to Social Security office, got my Social Security card. I went, sent out for my birth certificate in Frankfurt. I did these things because, and that's why I say reentry starts once you get in, because these are the things getting out that I knew that I had to have. So I took that effort to do that because, like Mr. Chandler always says, Greg, you did the work. And it's just like the old saying goes, you can take a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. You have to go, the inmate have to take the initiative to go out and get these things and seek these things, even though if you are someone's mentor, but they have to do the work.
Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but all the institutions now have reentry programs in their facilities. and part of their job is to make sure the guy has an ID, has his social security number, has those things before he leaves the institution.
Does that ID still say convicted felon on the card?
No, it's actually a ID from the Department of Transportation. So if you went to, you went to the driver's license bureau and you went there to get an ID, it would look just like theirs. You cannot tell they're in prison at all. They were in prison.
The system's evolved since I started. Like Warden Robey said, used to open the door and goodbye. But now we've learned, we've evolved, so we try to do those things. That's what reentry is all about. We make health care appointments. We give 30 days of medication. We make sure that the inmates got contacts in the community so that there is some support. It's not perfect, folks. It's not perfect. That's where you come in. That's where you can help.
Well, occasionally, and you all know exactly where I'm going with this, occasionally we walk in and we want to follow up, but he's shipped. He's gone. And we walk into that a lot of times in our class with a lot of unanswered dialogue that's been going on, and we want to answer, but he's shipped. And a lot of times we know where they got shipped to, and sometimes it takes a little research, and you got to ask the right people to find out where this particular inmate went. And it's hard. It's very hard to follow up with an inmate who's been shipped across the state, and we've lost that contact.
We're all going to look to Mr. Sweatt for this answer since he was Director of Population Management.
Well, and you're right. You walk in, you think you're going to have a class of 20 and 5 of them are shipped. It happens. And I'm not going to try to justify it. It happens, but like Amy said, if you have a relationship with the administration, that's the key. Because if you came to me and said, Warden Sweatt, they got shipped yesterday, can you let me know where they are so I can do a follow-up letter to them, and I can get somebody in the area to go see them at Green River or wherever they're at. Again, the relationship with the leader, with the warden, the deputy warden of a program, that's important.
And the reality of the system is with 25,000 people in prison, it's bed driven, folks. If there's an empty bed, it's not going to be empty long. We move people every day. And again, education. Educate yourself.
Have a question right here.
Well, I was taught early on working in prison ministry that if you have...
Cut your mic on.
My wife did that. It's still on?
Okay.
I've been working in prison systems for a little while. And if you have that relationship with an inmate, they're going to have the address to the church that you are a member of.
Right.
So it may be up to them to contact you. I mean, come on. They're growing in their faith too. If they're growing, they're going to reach out to you if you can't reach out to them. And they're going to know that you can't reach them because they've been transferred. I've got an individual that's been in prison 30 years. I baptized him 16 years ago. And I'm still working with him, but he's in a civil commitment center. When you go to a civil commitment center, they lose you. You lose them. It's very difficult to get a person out of a civil commitment center. But he's done his time. I was there the day he got out of prison, or should have gotten out of prison after 25 years,
They wouldn't let him go, and they shipped him off to Florida. And he fulfilled all the obligations in Florida by doing the time he did in Alabama. They okayed that for Florida, but then from there they took him to a civil commitment center. But anyway, like if you got that relationship with those individuals, they're going to have the address to the church. One of the things we were taught early on was never to give an inmate your home address.
Right.
But you can give them the church address.
Right.
And that's the way you can, reach, or they can reach you if you get,
Right.
separated.
Have probably one last question in the back here.
Was more of a comment and a question.
Okay.
I've been involved in the putting together this workshop and everything, but I imagine the workshop is most purpose of empowering the volunteers, and then I imagine most of us volunteers that's here at this workshop are members of the body of Christ. So I would hope, and my question would be, how we go about establishing that our measurement of success for these inmates would be the saving of their souls and them being led and them choosing and desiring. Like it sounds like Mr. Powell was being led by God's Spirit, and that's what a drive. See, what all of our help, all the help of education, all the help of the state, these inmates are still going to have, just like we in our fight in this Christian war in this world, we still have to have God's Spirit driving us to push us to do the things that we have to do to be good citizens in this world, and especially to be good citizens of the kingdom. So that's why going out, I need to be proper and say thank you to the warden. I never met you, but I went out to Luther Lucky with Mr. Hack and Joe Rivera for 2.5 years every Sunday until the pandemic. And I'm very grateful that God put you in the position he did so that we can have that privilege and others. But my intention, going just as a brother, not as a preacher or elder, nothing like that, but as a brother, was to support Brother Hack and Brother Joe, and to try to be a vessel in whatever way God could use me to get his word and his love to these inmates, because I know that will be the best safety net and success for them in whatever situation, whether they get transferred off to another prison, whether they be released to the streets, whether they be released to a halfway house, whether they end up in the box, end up in the hole. If they have God's Spirit and God's word driving them, then all these other things that we're working hard to put in place, I think they would take advantage of.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for being a good audience. We hope that something we've said will help you in your trials and errors trying to get the programs you would like to have started at your congregation. I know if I can be of any help, Brother Stevens has my address and phone number. Just give me a call. So we'll thank the panel. Let's give them a hand.